And one of the things, okay, I'm not sure if you've noticed this, I'm very predictable on where I'm going to go next. And so I would always encourage you, if when we finish up today and you're wondering, hey, what am I going to read in the Bible this week? I would encourage you, why don't you read ahead and see, okay, next week we're going to be in chapter 7. Read chapter 7 and see what's going on. It'll help you generate thoughts, generate questions, and that way when we come in and we do the message next week, hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those for you. But in the meantime, I just want to give us a quick recap of where we are. Chapter 5, we talked about Belshazzar and the writing on the wall and the fall of the Babylonian Empire. We talked about how his arrogance and his God complex just allowed his ego to grow so much that it just brought the utter collapse. And so now we're no longer looking at Babylon. We are now in Persia. Well, technically, we're still in Babylon, but we're dealing with the Persians, right? We're in the city, but not in the place. And let's just start off in chapter 6 and verse 1. And then we'll get into some explaining after that. It says in chapter 6, verse 1, it pleased Darius being the king, to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. And at this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of his government affairs. But they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Okay, a couple of things I just want to bring clarity to. First off, are any of you wondering, what is a satrap? Yeah, good question. It's basically like a modern-day bureaucrat, some sort of official who works for the governing authority. One of the interesting things about Persia is actually the first empire, the first nation-state, really, who divided their territory up into provinces. And what we're seeing here is kind of the beginning of early government. Now, you may remember the word satrap being used before because there were officials that did this, but we also read about this other one. It says the 3 administrators in the NIV. If you have ESV, or I think is it King James, it reads presidents. And some of the other, so these were people that were essentially, what we have here in Canada would be the premier over the province, right? The king is still in ultimate control, but he divided up the territories to make it easier to manage, because at this point, Persia is massive. Persia stretches all the way from India across to the Nile River. This is a big empire, and it was difficult to manage, and so he hired all of these people in order to take care of the land for him, so that way he might still receive everything he had deserved. And so that's what's going on here. And Daniel, once again, by the blessing of God, remember, he's a captive of Babylon who got brought to a foreign land. He was able to bring himself up to the right hand of the king of Babylon. And then after that, they get conquered by the Persians, and he works his way up until not only is he one of the 3 presidents or 3 administrators, but he is doing so good, the king plans, I'm going to set you in charge of everything because I trust you, Daniel. Daniel, you're such a good man. I trust you so much, and I'm going to set you up. And as we endeavor to serve the Lord and live in his ways, one of the things that we can inevitably expect in our own lives, and that occurs in any generation, is this. There's going to be people that are jealous. Jealousy is just a thing. We know it. Right? People become jealous easily, and people definitely become jealous when they feel that their power or their authority is being challenged, or if they think that we are in some way making them inferior to someone else. See, people want to have what we have, right? This is one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet, right? It was addressing this right off the bat because it recognized one of the very core things about our humanity, about our fallen, sinful nature, is that we want what others have, and we'll do whatever it takes to get it. The other thing that we see in this particular passage is we see a lot of projection, right? They don't like that Daniel is so favored. They don't like that Daniel's getting everything. And so what do? They look for corruption. They look for negligence. Why? Because they were corrupt. They were negligent. Right? They took bribes. They shirked duties. But they couldn't find that in Daniel because Daniel served faithfully and truthfully to a pagan government. Let's keep this in mind. Right? He's not serving in the temple of God under the authority of a theocracy. He's serving under a pagan emperor, a pagan king. But he does so faithfully and truthfully and with all honesty. He takes his duties seriously while continuing to serve the Lord. He recognizes that one of the antidotes, as we talked about last week, one of the antidotes to arrogance is humility. You want to make sure you do well in life? Stay humble. And you know what? As Christians, we've even developed practices in Christianity that are meant to help us practice humility. One such example that I thought of right off the top was we say grace before a meal. Where in the Bible does it say we must give thanks to the Lord for our food that we are about to receive? It's nowhere. It doesn't say it, right? We get the practice because Jesus would break bread and give thanks, right? That's where we got it from. But it was never a command given to us, but it was a reminder to help us remember, you know what? If Jesus is willing to give thanks, we ought to humble ourselves and say, we're not greater than he. So let us too give thanks. Let us remain humble and understand our place and our position. Right? You're not going to find that command, but it's a good practice that allows ourselves to stay humble before the Lord, because that's going to keep you out of a whole lot of trouble. If you stay humble, if you recognize your station, you recognize your place and your position, you're not going to get into any trouble. But as a result, when you do stay humble and when you do draw success, when things start going well for you, enemies will come for us. They will find no fault because God's ways are, in fact, the best ways. And it's funny because despite the world trying so many different ways to find new ways to do things, it's funny, even, what's his name? Is it Charles Dawkins? Is that the guy, the big atheist guy? Even he started to recognize, back in 2010, he famously said, number one, that he's a cultural Christian because he recognized the value that Christianity brought to the culture. And number two, he said, I didn't realize that when I was out there trying to dismantle Christianity, that Christianity was actually a bulwark, a shield, a defense against worse things that were out there in the world, right? Until the cracks started to appear. We started to see all the things that started to come into our society that we let in. So the fact is that people want what we have. People want what God has promised us, the flourishing that God gives us, but they don't want to do the work. And the fact of the matter is that if you do the things that God has called you to, if you do live in his ways, you may not be popular amongst your peers, but they will be forced to confess that you are not corrupt, that you are in fact good, because God's ways are good ways. And in the end, those who allow themselves to be corrupt often seeing good is often never results in a change of heart. It just increases jealousy, right? Think about who is the greatest example of this that we know of in all of Christendom, and it would have to be Satan. Because I'm sure maybe some of you have even heard this. Why wouldn't Satan just repent if he knows the truth? If Satan knows the truth, why doesn't he just turn and say, you know what, Jesus, you are Lord, you are God, I humble myself before you? And I'll tell you why. Because pride is powerful and it's predacious and it does not let go once it takes hold. Man, people thought it was hard quitting cigarettes. Try quitting pride. This is why pride is so incredibly dangerous, and it's why staying humble, as Daniel did in this case, is going to save his life. Let's look in verse 6. It says, so these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king. May the King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree, put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. And so King Darius put the decree in writing. And now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. And so they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree during the next 30 days that anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. And when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. And then the king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. And a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. And then the king returned to his palace, and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. First things first, I always thought it was really weird. I'm not sure if any of you ever thought this, but it is important for us to recognize, because we'll see this later on in the land of Persia in the book of Esther. For some reason, this is just the way that their empire was set up. Once the king's decree went out, you couldn't repeal it, which is strange, right? And I've often heard it expressed, they say this is why the Persians were silver while the Babylonians were gold, because Babylon, whatever the king said, that's what went. And if he decided to change his mind the next day, 10 seconds later, didn't matter. Whatever the king said, that was law. That's how that went. But in Persia, it was weird. They were kind of this weird thing where they thought that, well, if the king decreed it, it must have been on advice from the gods. And you can't repeal what the gods say. The gods are right. And so it was this weird mix of religion and government that ended up making for some really weird situations that we read about throughout Persian history. But one of the most important things I think that we can get out of this entire story that we should not walk away from is that God did not spare Daniel from the lion's den. Daniel went there. By the way, Daniel at this point is an old man. He's very likely, it's not entirely certain how old he is, but they figure at this point Daniel's probably in his 80s. He's an old man being tossed in with the lions. And God didn't spare him that. By the way, God didn't spare Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego the fiery furnace either. They were tossed in there. God didn't spare Abraham having to take his son Isaac up to the altar. God doesn't spare us the trial. And oftentimes in times of trouble, when we end up in trouble, when we end up in a time of trial and difficulty and great problem, great conflict, the one thing that you hear most often is the people just want out of the trial and the trial itself, and it's not even about the circumstances, it's not even about the consequences, it's not even about what's going to happen with the aftermath. I just want out of this right now, God. And if you're really God, you're going to take me out of this. You're going to get me out of this situation. But that's not how God has ever done things, ever. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, pick up your Bible and start reading it, cover to cover. You'll see it for yourself again and again and again. Why does God put us through this? Why does God make us go through these trials? Right? Even Jesus Christ was not spared his trial. And why? Because the trial, the conflict, the persecution is what reveals our character, who we really are. How we endure difficulty, how we react, and how we deal with a situation reflects what we believe in. And oftentimes, I am shocked and even horrified at what I see. Because sometimes, how many of you have been in a situation and you see someone and you're like, wow, they're a Christian, they go to church every week, they're donating all this money, they're doing all this stuff, but the moment life gets a little bit more difficult and things start falling apart, they just immediately turn their back on God. God, how could you do this to me? Whoa. Were you really serving the Lord? Did you really invest in that relationship? Because it doesn't, like, how could you turn on a swivel so quickly? See, so often I see that people will lay claim to the promise of Jesus Christ on their life and then renounce him the moment that life becomes challenging. As if by Jesus not sparing him, somehow the trial itself reveals that God must not be God. And yet this is so important why we read the scriptures and see for ourselves that this is exactly how God acts every single time. In fact, if God were to spare us from the trial, I would be a little bit more suspicious. Wait, God, how come you did all this for all these other people but not for me? See, the Lord is with us nonetheless, despite whatever we're going through, no matter what's coming our way, and he will be there with us as we come through to the other side. He is the one that perseveres through it. Daniel was in the lion's den. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been? I'm not saying he broke faith. I'm saying even someone of faith, you imagine into the pit. Stone comes over. It's dark. What do you hear in the dark? You hear the low growl and the grumble of the lions. You hear the deep purrs even if you knew you were safe, that is unsettling. Verse 19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and he hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near the den, he called Daniel in an anguished voice. Daniel! Servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed. He gave orders to lift Daniel up out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Then at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown to the lion's den along with their wives and children. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and the people in every language and of all the earth, May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So between Babylon and Persia, as I said, Daniel served for about 70 years. He served these two empires. And it was always under foreign rule, foreign occupation. He never got to return to his home. He never got to go back to Jerusalem. He never got to see those lands. And yet he never broke faith. And time again, the Lord showed up for him. So what can we learn from the life of Daniel? As we look at Daniel, as I mentioned earlier, this is the end of the historical part of the book of Daniel, and we're going to get into the prophetic part in the latter half. One of the things I look at is, number one, we can learn about faith and how important it is not to lose faith. And by the way, as you've heard me say many times before, I'm not talking about blind faith. I'm not talking about a leap of faith that you got to just be like, well, I guess God's there, so I better trust in that. No, God has given us plenty of reasons and plenty of examples of why we need to believe in him, and he continues to give them to us. Right? We don't just have the Bible and those accounts, although those accounts are pretty good. Like, let's face it, we got 4 different gospels, 4 different accounts of the life of Jesus Christ, 4 different eyewitnesses who went out and said, this is what I saw, this is what happened, and this is what was going on, including the death and the resurrection of Christ and the ascension to heaven. There were hundreds of witnesses, thousands of people who witnessed the miracles of Christ. And the only leap of faith that you need to take as a person here in 2025 is this: was Jesus lying or not? That's it. We know he died. We know he resurrected. We know he went to heaven. So was he God or not? That's it. That's your leap of faith. Because he said he did. He said he was. So the question is he a liar? Or was all of that evidence that he is who he says he is? This is why I think it's ridiculous when people are like, oh yeah, you just got to have faith. And they make it sound like you just need to believe enough. It's like, no, he gave us every reason to believe. He's shown us time and time again. He shows up, performs miracles. He does things for us. But are you looking for answers? Are you looking for the truth? Or do you want convenience? Let's face it, we live in a world of Amazon, okay? No one wants to even go to the store anymore. We love convenience. And that's what people are looking for in their relationship with Jesus Christ. The trouble is, no one can do the work for you. No one can build that relationship for you. No one can reveal this stuff for you. You are the one who has to put in the work, put in the time, put in the hours of reading the Bible, of having those discussions, having those prayers, having that time, if you want to know the truth for yourself. Do you want answers or do you want convenience? Because your faith shouldn't be based on nothing. It should be based on the overwhelming evidence that has been given to us. Another thing that we need to remember is we got to prepare for the challenging times ahead, right? What did Daniel do? He was preparing. To be alive today, to be born and living and breathing is to face certain challenges as we go through life. And most of life, from my experience, has been challenges and not easy, joy-filled times. I love those easy, joy-filled times. And there's moments in our life where we relish and we think back fondly on them for the rest of our lives. But most of life is a grind and a challenge and figuring out how we're going to accomplish this, how we're going to overcome that, how are we going to get through this. Like, that is most of life. It's a challenge. And so, how much preparation are you doing? Not only that, laying claim to faith in Jesus Christ, saying, you know what, I believe that Jesus is who he says he is. I believe that Jesus Christ is not a liar, that he is God, and that he did come to save us. That's actually only going to generate even more difficulty in your life, especially in a world like ours, which is openly hostile to the very nature of God. Since, of course, we have become, right, our world, we're so wise and we're so all-knowing, that we somehow believe that we know more than God. See, if we truly discover our faith, if we find something real and genuine and we discover the true God, if we discover who he is and what he's capable of, then I have to ask you, are you living like you really believe that, right? So we have faith, we have preparation, and we also have the power of prayer, which I cannot overstate. Like, there's no way someone can overstate this. Think about it. God hears your prayers. King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the God of the universe, hears every word you say. I can't get an audience with the Prime Minister. I can't get an audience with the Premier. I've never even had an audience with the mayor or my councilman, okay? But the King of Kings and Lord of Lords will make time for me. That's the power of prayer. See, when we seek him, when we call him, when we talk to him, he listens. Daniel was spared from the lions, but not the pit. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saved from the fire, but not the furnace. And I'm sure that, as I mentioned, as Daniel was being tossed in the pit, he probably had a lot of concerns as he's hearing the grumbles of the lions and he's hearing the snarls as they're chewing on the bones of previous victims that are in the pit. But the person that we see, the man who is revealed in this situation, is someone who continues to petition God throughout the entire ordeal. What's he do? He gets on his knees and prays. The very thing that got him in trouble to begin with is the thing he keeps doing. He does not stop because he goes, if I'm going to make it through this, only the King of Kings and Lord of Lords is going to see me through. And so he went to him and he prayed to him. It was Daniel's prayer life. Was Daniel's hope. Daniel's prayer life was his strength. Knowing that God was with him, could hear him, and was listening to him, made a way for him to get through what he was going through. As I said, it didn't matter that the lions' mouths were closed, that they weren't going to actually eat him. Can you imagine the anxiety of that situation, being in the dark, hearing those things off in the distance? Oh, it got to me. It's like those people that go shark diving in the cage. I'm like, I'm in a cage. I'm still not going in there. There's sharks. Finally, I think the most important lesson is something I already touched on, but I think the most important lesson from the entire book of Daniel, one of the most important lessons I think we can get out of the Bible is this: preparation. See, Daniel spent years and years and years reading and praying and learning. He was reading the scriptures. He was reading the prophets. He spent countless nights praying to God. So many months seeking after God's wisdom. All of this was preparation. All of this was getting him ready for the challenges that waited him down the road. He didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know what awaited him, but he was getting ready and preparing himself and saying, God, I need to get ready. I need to be prepared for whatever challenge you throw my way, because God, I've seen some things in my life and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that if I get ready, if I prepare, if I do what needs to be done, then I will be ready for whatever challenge you throw my way. He was able to keep true. All this preparation that he did was making him ready for when the king would pass an unjust law. Daniel would serve the kingmaker, not the king. Daniel would no longer would not corrupt himself. He remained true and he remained loyal to the Lord of Lords. Why? Because of all of the years he had been preparing. It would have been so easy. Can you imagine if that happened today and there was a law went out and it said, if you get caught praying, it's right to the electric chair for you. Right? Think about that. How many Christians would just stop praying for 30 days? Right? Because remember, there's a time limit. There's only 30 days that you can't pray. How many Christians would stop praying? I'm willing to venture, I think a lot would. Because how many of us have put in the time, put in the reps, put in the preparation, put in the time to say, you know what? I'm going to trust in God. Why do I say that, by the way? Because we've already seen this in history before. This happened in Rome under Nero, under the great persecution. And there was another emperor after him. I can't remember who came after, but it was the one before Constantine. And it was like a great purge and a great persecution. And there were many, many Christians who just went along and pretended to get along. But then there were those who said, no, I will not compromise my faith. And a lot of those, by the way, ended up fighting lions in the Colosseum. A lot of them died. It was not good. But they were prepared. They did not relent. They did not recant. They did not give up what they believed. They read, they prayed, they trusted in the Lord. And as we see here in the book of Daniel, Daniel did not bemoan his capture. He did not complain about his station. He did not complain about the duties. He just served, and he served at his best of his ability. And God continued to elevate him over the years. And when it mattered most, and when Daniel was ready, Daniel was prepared for what he had to face. And Daniel was ready for the greatest challenge that anyone is going to have to face, and that is, of course, a life and death situation. So have we put in the reps? Because maybe your trial is happening now. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Maybe you're going to face a big trial next week, tomorrow, next month, next year. You don't know when it's going to come. But are you prepared? Are you putting in the reps? Are you getting into Christian shape, shall we say? Will you break? Will your faith break in the time when you need it most, or will it endure the challenge? Are you gathering your evidence? Are you gathering your knowledge, your wisdom? Are you gathering up all the things that the Lord is willing to pour onto you? Or are you hoping that the stories that you heard as a child about the Bible, the first time you heard the story of Daniel's in the lion's den, or you're like, oh, okay, I heard it once, I'm good, I never need to listen to it again? Or are you putting in the reps, putting in the exercise, putting in the time? See, I'm here today because as we were talking about this morning, no one can do it for you. Your parents can't do it for you. Your parents can't save you. As much as parents would love to be able to save our children, we can't do that for our kids. We have to do it for ourselves. We have to put in the time. We have to read the Bible. We have to put in the prayer. We have to put in all of that exercise to be ready. And I'm not here to make anyone feel bad. I'm here today to encourage you. You can do it. You can pick up your Bible. You can read. You have difficulty reading, there's audio Bibles. They are out there. They are free. Please check out our YouTube. We have the links to all the resources out there. Whatever it is, I just encourage you, get into your Bible, get into the Word, prepare for your trial, because one day it will come, and will you be ready? Will you have the strength to be thrown to the lions, or are you going to fall prey to the predators? The only one that can make that up for you is you. God's willing to give you everything you need. And as a church, I'm here to encourage each and every one of you and help you in any way that I can. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to each and every individual to make sure that we're ready for our trial. We're ready for what's coming ahead. So let's not put off until tomorrow. Let's start today.